It's 2013, I'm 19 years old, and I'm riding my dad's dual sport Suzuki motorcycle on the way to my math class. I'm living on the beautiful island of Guam at the time, and it's midday and scorching hot out. So to get to class, I have to get on what's called the back road, and this is one lane in each direction. And this is also where a lot of construction vehicles transport a lot of gravel. Well, on this day, I get stuck behind one of these trucks, and it's going like super slow, like 30 miles an hour. And on top of this, I'm being pelted by the rocks bouncing out the top. So I do what I think any sensible person would do. I'm like, I'm gonna pass this truck. So I wait for an opening, and I see like a nice, clean, open, straight shot. Go around this truck, and I really only have to do like 45 miles an hour to get around it safely. But no, I'm 19 and I'm stupid. So I open this thing up and I'm like, wee, wee, because I thought it was like so cool. Well, the bike that I'm riding is only meant to be going like 80 miles an hour. This is not like a crotch rocket. It's a practical bike. I take it to its limits to like 75. Then I hit a dip. And this causes the bike to start to wobble. And I'm like, oh, this is a little scary. Like, let me just let the bike correct itself. It gets worse. And I'm like, okay, if this doesn't stop, I'm gonna get slammed by a car in the oncoming lane. So I freak out and I try to grip the handlebars and will it towards the grass so that way I can crash safely. Well, instead what happens is it whips me into the opposite direction, and I am now sliding into the oncoming lane on my side. And I'm like, holy shit, this is where I die. Like, I'm gonna get slammed by a car, and if not from that, I'm just gonna die from some sort of impact. So I'm like Disney on ice, just sliding into the oncoming lane. And I try to crawl away from the bike, it doesn't work, and I end up using my helmet to slow the bike down faster. It works, and I'm laying there and I'm like, okay, I survived. Like, I made it. Like, I just gotta get up now so I don't get hit. Well, remember truck guy? Relax, he doesn't hit me or anything. He gets out of his truck and he comes by to help me. And in this process, I am assessing my body and I'm like, okay, I don't feel anything broken, I'm okay. But there's gas leaking out the bike all over me, and I'm laying in a puddle of it. I look back, and I see this guy running over with a cigarette in his mouth. And I'm like, oh shit, so this is how I die. I burst into flames in the middle of a road with a complete stranger. But I managed to like communicate to him like, you're gonna light me on fire, please, don't bring that cigarette over. And he manages to hear me, and he's like, oh shit. And we're good, crisis averted. He lifts the bike off of me and he helps me walk it over to the side of the road. The bike is basically unscathed. All I did was like bend the turn signal, but when I look at my arm, it's raw, like just gone. All the skin is gone, like parchment paper. It just flew off my body. Same thing for my hip. Look down at my hip, it is raw. And this guy sees this and he's like, holy shit, I'm calling 911. So he calls an ambulance and they come over and the EMT starts questioning me. Well, as this is happening, a truck hits the same exact dip that I hit, and it starts heading in our direction to the point where we had to get behind the ambulance because we thought we were going to get hit. And I was like, oh, this is how I die. Nope, this truck swerves into the oncoming lane, sideswipes a car in the opposite lane, and then goes down into a ditch. And I'm like, okay, everybody saw that. That damn dip is out here, it's out here to kill people. Like, this is not my fault. Like, I could not have avoided this. So, everyone's okay, and I go home and I start to tell my parents the story about what happened. And I also learned that my class that I was going to was actually canceled. So I was going to a class that wasn't even in session. So naturally, I'm livid and I play the blame game. And I'm like, you know, if it wasn't for this stupid truck and this stupid ditch, and if I had known class was canceled, none of this ever would have happened. And I was like, this isn't my fault, being the stupid, naive me. Well, what I didn't tell my parents was that I was actually playing video games up until about the last 12 minutes before class. And this caused me to not put on the right protective gear and to, more importantly, not check the Facebook group for the math class that I was going to attend. And had I had done this, I would have known that class was canceled and I never would have even went. But because I was rushing, this also fed into the decision of me justifying my stupidity in doing 70 miles an hour to make it to class on time. Well, I didn't share any of these details with my parents because I was embarrassed and I was refusing to accept responsibility for my own actions. Rather than owning up to the fact that I made a very poor decision by playing video games all the way up until the last minute, I blamed everything else, and the lesson that I learned on the surface was, if you're late, don't rush. It's better to arrive late than to not arrive at all because you're dead. Which isn't, a bad thing to learn from. But in actuality, what I should have taken away from this was sometimes the shitstorms that come your way are a culmination of poor decisions that you made prior to this. And it's very easy to blame everything else around you, when in actuality, they were all decisions that you could have made to avert this crisis. So, hope that resonates with you a little bit, and drive safe. If you're late, don't rush, and take responsibility for the decisions you make in life. Otherwise, if you want to know the story about what made me actually stop showing late to things rather than not rushing, subscribe, and I'll tell a story about that later.